All right, guys. First off, as always, good day. So I'm glad you're here. Now, this lesson is basically um, the types of weapons used in World War One. Okay, so we're going to be looking at some weapons and things like that. But first, before we get to it, let's look at this warm up. All right. So first question is, what do you see? Okay, so make your list, things like that. The second question asks you, what are almost, not all these guys, what are almost all these guys doing? Okay. And the second part of that question is, if you notice, every one of them is looking up. They're looking up towards the hand. And I want to know who do you think that hand represents? Right? Obviously, these people are looking like a little kid, like I didn't do it, it was this guy. I didn't do it. And so they're all looking at that person. So who do you think that person represents? Okay, so be sure you answer that. Um, so uh, go ahead and answer that. We're going to be starting the notes in three, two, one. All right. So during World War One, there's like a new system of fighting, and there's because of inventions and things like that. The old ways of fighting is gone. All right. So back in the day, what the guys used to be in the front lines, just marching and things like that. Now, this new way of fighting called trench warfare has taken over. Okay, so the quote unquote gentleman's way to fight, the honorable way to fight, is long gone. Okay, now this war is truly one of the wars that was used from every aspect: land, sea, and air. Okay, also, new inventions came out, as well as some improvements on old weapons were brought out. Um, and because of that, the losses were devastating. Okay, so basically, in total, there was about 9 to 10 million soldiers killed and about 21 million wounded. Now, when we say wounded, we mean like shot in the arm, all the way someone who got like both legs blasted off, but they survived. You know, so those are considered the wounded people. The other thing that makes this war unique is that there's so many civilians who died. There's about 10 million people who died um, from direct contact with the war. You know, it just so happened they were in the wrong place, wrong time. You know, the fighting started, bombs going off, things like that, people shooting, and these poor people were in the way. You know, another thing was starvation. You know, food was scarce, and soldiers basically got food um, when they could, and the poor civilians got nothing. You know, because again, you have to remember, it's war. It's not like people would just go out and just start making bread all of a sudden, because again, those fields might be taken over by soldiers. They could be burned, things like that. Also, disease. Right around this time, there's a flu that spread around the world in basically like 3 months, and it killed a lot of people. Okay. Another little fun fact about this war is that in France and Germany, guys from the age of 15 to 49, 80% of them went to war. So for every 5 guys, 4 of them went to war, 1 of them didn't. Right? That's a lot of guys. That's a generation, of men who just basically went to war, and many of them died. Okay. So again, the old way, which is the picture on top, no longer, it's obsolete. So now it's the bottom one, in the trenches, hiding, things like that. All right, so now we're going to get to the land first. Okay, so when it comes to the land, there's been new inventions, improvement on old weapons, and even some old tactics came out, and they weren't that really that great. All right, so here's a little fact, and it's going to be on your quiz. Okay, I'm telling you right now, and if you had the volume off, I feel sorry for you. Okay, the thing is, a lot of the soldiers, I mean, a lot of them had the bolt action rifle. Okay. they did not have the repeater. Okay, the repeater was there, but it wasn't like every single soldier had a repeater. Okay, um, and the thing is, the repeater was a spring-loaded rifle. So if you look at the design, you can see how the bullets would creep up, and when you shot, you know, there it goes, just next bullet in, things like that. Um, the other thing is, uh, unlike the old days where the bullets were, you had to put the primer, put the powder, the bullet, stuff that in there, get the flintlock, put it, that was all gone. Okay, because now the bullets had the powder and the primer in the casing, so all you had to do was just load up and shoot. Okay. The other thing was the cavalry. Now, cavalry is basically soldiers with horses, right? And the thing is, a lot of these generals and commanding guys felt, we can't get through the trenches, but horses, those things can move and they can jump. So if we can get them to jump over the barbed wire, then those soldiers on the horses can basically create a diversion. Basically, they can get inside the trenches and start fighting the Germans, and now give our guys enough time to go through no man's land and get to that area. Um, but the thing is, the next invention actually stopped a lot of cavalries, and that's the machine gun. These horses would come, and the machine gun would just mow them down. So millions of horses died. Right. Now, speaking of the machine guns, there was two basic um, guns. There was the heavy guns and the light guns. Well, light machine guns. The heavy guns, the two biggest well-known ones were the Maxim and the Hotchkiss gun. Okay, that picture right there you see, that is of the Maxim gun. Now the Lewis gun was lighter, you know, and the thing is, it was a lot easier to pick it up and move it to a position you needed to, as opposed to the Maxim or the Hotchkiss gun. Okay, again, just like the Maxim gun, like the picture you see there, you need two people, one to feed the bullets and the other one to operate the gun. Now, here's the thing. When it comes to chemical weapons, I want this to be known. This is the first time that chemical weapons used in the world, when it comes to war. Um, I don't want you to get this confused with biological weapons because the thing is, the Huns actually used uh, biological warfare back in like the 14th century, 13th century. When the Black Plague came around, they actually put their dead bodies on catapults and launched them into the towns where they wanted to invade. So these bodies that had the boils full of blood and pus would be flinging in the air, and if they hit the ground, hit some trees, hit someone's house, that blood and pus would just go everywhere, and that spread the disease. So that was truly the first use of biological weapons. Now, speaking of the chemicals, there's two of them. There's a diphosgene, and then there's a mustard gas. Now, what made diphosgene very scary is that it was colorless. Okay, it thing is, it can be condensed into liquid because if you take a gas and you heat it up, and it builds up condensation, that's the liquid. But thing is, this was more lethal as a gas than a liquid. Okay. The other one is the mustard gas. Now, this stuff was horrible. Okay. It's a chlorine gas, and it's like 2.5 times denser than air. Now, it came out like kind of a green color, but it's also been, when it said there was like yellow to it as well, but primarily green. And the thing is, the smell of it from people who actually smelt it, they said it was like a mix of pineapple and pepper. Now how it works is this: when you breathe it in into your lungs, the gas would basically like make your lungs fill with water from your own body, right? So basically, you're kind of drowning in your own body water. And the thing is, it would also cause permanent lung damage. Now, most people, they get some type of disability. Again, the lungs, you can't breathe. Second thing is their vision. They would lose their vision. They go kind of blind. but more than likely, a lot of those people, they died. Again, from the lungs in the water in their lungs, they could not breathe. They're basically drowning. Okay. Now, some people got lucky. They were on the outskirts of gas, so they only got a little bit. Again, coughing was a big thing that happened to them. Vomiting, they would throw up a lot. And as another thing was the eye irritation. So they wouldn't necessarily go blind like completely, but they really, it just like hurt and it was like dry and it just irritated, to the point where they can like put water. Yeah, it's a type of relief, but it really wasn't do much. Okay. The other thing is artillery. Now these are big guns that can shoot mortars far away. Right? They ranged from 75 millimeters to 420 millimeters, and those big ones were called the Big Berthas. Those those artillery guns were huge. Now, the Big Berthas could actually send an object about 1,700 pounds 6 miles away. So if it's like a cannonball weighing that big, they can launch that puppy, and wherever it landed, it's going to cause some damage. Now the thing is, some projectiles, like you see in this picture right here, they would get launched and they would get stuck in the ground or in a tree and they wouldn't explode. And it wouldn't be till later on after the war people would see these and be like, oh, what's that? And they try to move it around and poof, blow up. Um, Also, some like landmines were set up and people forgot that they were there and they would walk around and poof, blow up. Now, the last thing is tanks. Now, I don't want you to think how tanks are now is the same way they were back then because they weren't. These are like the primitive tanks, and they were used more of a supporting role. Okay, because tanks, some people thought, oh, they can use them to cross the trenches. No, they got stuck in trenches. Some people thought, oh, we can put them in through no man's land. They could take a bunch of bullets. No, they were damaged very easily. Some people thought, these tanks can go fast. No, the average speed was 3 miles an hour. So basically, you can go on a good jog and keep up with it. Okay. Their inability to function really hindered them in World War One, but in World War Two, they progress. And I want you to keep how I described the tanks in the back of your mind. And when we get to World War Two, you'll see how much they've improved in 20 years. So here's my question to you. Of all the land weapons, which do you feel had the greatest impact on World War One soldiers? So which one was the best for them? Okay, so go back to your notes, look and think to yourself, which one was the best one for them? And the second one is, which one do you think was like the least impactful? The one that it's like, why have that? You know, it really is not going to serve much of a purpose. Okay, so which one was the best? Which one was the worst? So pause the video, answer the question. All right, so now we're going to get into the sea section. Now, there were some warships before World War One called dreadnoughts. Now, these things were pretty big at that time. The thing is, they actually had guns that could do damage to not only ships across from them, but also submarines in the water. Because the other ships had lighter guns, and those guns they couldn't really penetrate through the water because they would go only a certain depth, and then that's the bullets would just stop. Again, remember, bullets can go in the water, but because of the pressure of the water, it stops them. Unless they are bigger, they have a higher, stronger, they have a bigger caliber, they can have a better velocity, then they can go a little bit further. Okay, so the older ships didn't want that, the dreadnoughts did. But when World War One came, then that's when these battleships came out, and they were called super dreadnoughts. Okay, this one particular ship, the HMS Orion, this thing was bigger, faster than all the other dreadnought ships. And basically, they had 10 armor piercing guns on them, five on each side, and they had five turret guns. Now, the turret guns were, again, for other ships, same level as them, and airplanes in the sky. They weren't for going in the ground. That's what uh, the armor piercing guns were for. Okay. Now, I don't want you to think like when it comes to submarines, there was no other submarines besides the Germans. There was other countries had submarines, but the Germans had the best submarines. These were called U-boats. Now, in the 4 years of war, they sank 6,394 ships. That's military ships, cargo ships, passenger ships, civilian ships. And they only lost about 229. So that's like over for every one um, every one submarine, they took down at least 20 ships. That's not a bad ratio. So that picture up on top, that's a picture of a U-boat, a German U-boat right there. Okay. Now remember, these submarines had torpedoes, but the ships were not defenseless. They had these things called depth charges. And basically, it's like a barrel full of explosives. And what they did is on the top, they had this gauge where they would turn it, and whatever that was the depth that the barrel would go down to before it exploded. Because again, in the water, there's pressure. And the deeper the thing goes, the pressure is going to put, and that's what they put the gauge on. So once it reached that pressure point at so many feet, then also, I forgot to mention, the submarines can only go a certain depth because, again, of the pressure. If they go below what their recommendation level is, they could start crushing. And once it starts crushing, that's it. You know, that's going to cause a lot of problems. All right, lastly, we're going to look at the air. Okay, now this is the first time that airplanes have been used in war. And the thing is, um, at first the planes sucked. They were not good. They were basically made of canvas, which is what you stuff you paint on, things like that. So they weren't really flyable. But near closer to the end, they became very, very efficient weapons. So the thing is, the best pilots, they were known as aces. That was their nickname. Now, there were some other nicknames for them. They were called Knights of the Sky. Okay. Now, don't get me wrong. There were some amazing, amazing pilots at this time. But one of the most famous was that guy up on top there. You see, his name was the Red Baron. As you can see, Miss Benavides is right behind me. Okay. I know. Disrupting your lesson in your education. I know. How dare she? So the Red Baron in Britain, he was known as the Red Knight. In France, he was known as the Red Devil. But his real name was Manfred von Richthofen. All right. Now, it's one thing for a person to say, "Oh, I killed so many people." Okay, they can claim all they want, but unless the other side says, "Yeah, we lost 60 people, we lost 50 people," someone says, "Oh, I shot down 80." No, the other side said, "No, you only shot down. We only lost this many people." But both sides can confirm that he took down 80 planes. That's amazing at that time. All right. Now his group of flyers, what they would do is they would swoop down in front of planes, come across, and look like they're going to attack them, but then they sweep down, and then somebody on the other side would attack them. Okay. They were known as a flying circus because of their loops and turns and things like that to distract and confuse the enemy. All right. Now the last big uh, aviation thing was the Zeppelins. These are basically blimps, okay, but they're big, huge blimps. And they were used for not only dropping bombs, but also spying because they could go higher than any other plane. All right. The problem is they were filled with hydrogen and they had a steel frame, basically a balloon. And what happened is when they were going up, sometimes these other planes would come by and shoot down the balloon, and that would cause them to crash. Now, a Zeppelin plane, basically carrying about 4,000 pounds of bombs, could travel at 85 miles per hour. That's pretty impressive. All right, so here's your last question. Which one would you rather be in, fighting in, if you were in World War One? Would you rather be in a plane or a battleship? So would you rather be in the air or on sea? And why? Explain your reasoning. Don't be like some other students who just put, oh, I pick a plane, I pick a submarine or battleship. Why? Why? Okay, that's where they're losing. You guys are losing points. You don't explain. Please explain. Okay. There's a writing prompt on the bottom. That's another thing too. Don't just put ship because no, write it out. Write it out. You have the writing prompt right there. Okay. So that's the end of this lesson. Hopefully you learned something new. Um, Make sure your name is on your packet, and when you come into class, be sure you turn into the basket, black basket by the door. Again, do not hand it to me. Do not put it on my desk because it will get lost. Okay. So with that being said, hopefully you guys have a good day. Take care and be safe.